I'll have a Krabby Patty.
How original.
And with extra onions.
Daring today, aren't we?
Sometimes movesets get kind of boring. Like, we all know Kyogre will run Origin Pulse. Anyone can do that. But I respect a player who will run Tackle on his Kyogre. Sure, he might lose because only an idiot will run that, but it's interesting, so that's not the point. So today, we're going to be exploring some creative sets. Starting now. Flygon. So Flygon would sometimes run Gust on a Choice Band set in Gen 3 OU. It sounds like a joke, because Gust itself is kind of a joke move. It's one of those moves that you forget right away after your Pidgey evolves to level like 16 or something. It's pretty good. Here's the thing, Flygon is one of my favorite has-beens, at least nowadays, because the presence of Garchomp kind of just made his viability be reduced to atoms. But there was once a time, a prehistoric era actually, called Gen 3 OU, I don't know if you've heard of it, where he was once viable. Granted, you and I were probably not even conceived at that time, but he was good even if it was a long time ago. He had a fairly good speed stat and a solid mix of attacking capabilities. He was also immune to spikes, where this was the good old days where spikes was the only hazard that existed. Tell a Gen 3 OU player about Stealth Rocks and watch them have a heart attack. He also had two very important resistances to Rock and Fire, two relevant types in Gen 3 OU. His sets usually consisted of Earthquake, Rock Slide, the Hidden Powers, most notably Hidden Power Bug, Fire Blast, and or Toxic. But there was this one set he would run that was a bit different than others, that being the Gust moveset, like I said. This set was pretty much like all of the other ones, except it was accompanied by a Choice Band. If you're like me, you only know the move Gust from the anime, but see, Flygon needed that move to deal with two very annoying Pokemon called Heracross and Breloom. These two were fighting types that, well, they had common weaknesses and weren't too fast, but they could very easily rack up KOs if you let them get out of hand. So when you saw them, you had to handle them right away. Now, flying type moves really didn't have a lot to work with at that point, and if we're being for real, they still don't have a lot to work with. The only really relevant flying type move is Defog, which is a utility move. So, you might be thinking, just use Hidden Power Bug. Everyone had access to it, and it's 4 times as effective on both. Well, you might be right, but remember, the thing is that more often than not, he was already using his Hidden Power card to run Hidden Power Bug to deal with Celebi, who could even tank super effective hits. Remember, this was at the time where Celebi was still considered like the epitome of bulk, even if it has the worst defensive typing ever. These were the good days of Gen 3 OU, anything was possible, and modern problems require modern solutions. Except this isn't a modern problem, but that's the thing. But it doesn't matter. You might be saying to yourself, Gust is super low base power. And you're right, but with correct investment, and more importantly, a 4 times weakness, they both carry. It'll do just fine. This set is really different because you're not really at a disadvantage when running this move. It's more like it's situational, because it's a really good move against these two Pokemon. And it would be different maybe if those two were the most common Pokemon in Gen 3 OU tier, but they are honestly not. They're not super rarely seen, but definitely not staples of the game. Like, you can go a solid 5 to 10 games without seeing someone use either a Breloom or a Heracross. And so sometimes you might be facing a team without those two and be like, damn, what a waste of a move slot. Of course, there's other Pokemon that take super effective damage from them. It's really low base power, so it won't make as much damage as you think it would. But out of all of these sets that we're going to see, I would say this is the most viable one. Like, if you bring this to a tournament or something, this will be the one that will get you least likely laughed at. The next Pokemon we're talking about is Gliscor. Gliscor is one of the most predictable Pokemon to exist on this planet. You usually don't want your Pokemon to be super predictable, because that makes it easier for players to guess what you're running. But Gliscor is one of those Pokemon who doesn't really care about that, because like, even if you know what he's running, he's still going to be incredibly difficult to deal with. It doesn't matter that you know he's carrying a Toxic Orb, Earthquake, Protect, Swords Dance, Toxic Spikes, whatever, because what are you gonna do about it? Oko him? He'll just Terra, good luck with that. Out of all of the Pokemon that he has a set that is so set in stone, there is no reason to mess with it, because it's already the epitome of peak. Gliscor is amazing. There's no reason to mess with him, and even if you do, just whatever you do, do not, under any circumstances, change his item, which is Toxic Orb, which at this point is basically his signature item, because nobody cares about Breloom. That being said, we're going to change his signature item. There's a few variations of the set, but I'm going to go with my favorite, which is Acrobatics White Herb Gliscor. If you don't know what White Herb does, I wouldn't necessarily blame you, because I kind of forgot what it did as well. I had to search it up. Basically, it's an item that restores negative stat changes of your Pokemon. That's pretty cool. You see it sometimes on Pokemon that run Shell Smash, but it's nothing compared to Toxic Orb and to what it can do, which basically makes Gliscor immortal. So why run it? Well, it's easy. You're also running Scale Shot. It's a multi-hit move that raises your speed but lowers your defense. So the plan becomes use that, restore your fallen defense stat, and then use Acrobatics. And if you remember Acrobatics, it's a move that doubles in power if you hold an item. The rest of your move slot is pretty much free for whatever you want to run, probably Swords Dance or Earthquake. The set turns Gliscor into a far more offensive Pokemon. We really haven't seen this offensive version of Gliscor since Generation 5-ish, when he would usually run Facade and Swords Dance. Nowadays it's more defensive, working as a utility mon. I want to say because that's why he got banned at some point. He technically can be a sweeper, but nothing like this set. It's really great, but it's super gimmicky, unfortunately. I don't want to be that guy, but actually his normal sets have a lot more potential because they really help out his teammates with its utility capabilities. This type of strategy is the type of thing that only works once, especially if you're facing the same person multiple times. This also means Gliscor has a lot less longevity now that he's not holding an item of eternal youth. There's also another variant, which is to use Fling. Fling is a move whose base power depends on the item being flung. Now the secret advantage to it is, I suppose, primarily that you can cause damage to your opponent and poison them at the same time. That way you can save a turn, and because it's so unorthodox, again, your opponent will not see it coming because, well, it's not common. With it doesn't also hurt that it is a dark type move, which is a great offensive type, and that's great. Gliscor is unlike other Pokemon, where once they fling their item, they can no longer benefit from it. It's not true for Gliscor though, because he can keep recovering HP. Same principle as in when he gets his item knocked off. Also, it means that if someone used knockoff, they don't get that boost. It's odd, yes, but it can be useful sometimes, and obviously it's pretty annoying. The reality is, this move pairs well with Gliscor, because Gliscor is one of the only Pokemon that can actually benefit from it, because no one else would reasonably throw their Choice Band or Choice Scarf away, since they would lose their boost. It's no Damp Rock, Rain Set, or Gallade, but it's not innovative enough for you to be like, wow, this might actually disrupt the meta, which very rarely happens, to be fair. So yeah, not the best, but it's interesting. I appreciate the effort, I guess. A for effort. The next set is something I found on Reddit. It's a set about another one of our fellow bulky ground types, which is Lando. Lando has a lot of sets he can run, whether it's a bulky or full-on offense, but they usually have something in common, which is that they both usually include a physically offensive move, usually U-turn, Earthquake, or Stone Edge. And this makes sense. Its physical attack is very high, and he has access to moves like Swords Dance, and it works just fine. Now, some sets that are a bit more uncommon include specially offensive sets, which usually include Earth Power as a move. This isn't the most common thing, but it's not rare enough to be considered a rare set. People usually run it so that you don't get your own attack lowered by other Intimidate users, and its special attack stat is acceptable enough for it to be able to cause decent damage. People also expect it less. But one person took this idea, which isn't too unorthodox, and took it even further. It is Lando with Weather Ball, Sandstorm, Sunny Day, and Rain Dance. I don't know exactly what the thought process behind this was. Now this is super unique, you don't need me to tell you that. It's pretty much a one-man team, even though technically he has one move. With these three variants, he gets a lot of variety and great coverage, since Water, Ground, and Fire are three of the best offensive typings. Obviously with the moveset like this, it affects everyone, so you have to be careful who you pick to support your Landorus. They have to be Pokemon that can benefit from different weathers. That means that you would maybe want to look into Pokemon with Chlorophyll to benefit from sun, or Pokemon with Swift Swim to benefit from rain, or Pokemon with Sand Rush, etc, etc. That can be challenging. However, that can also be the inverse for your opponent, as in you can benefit from messing up their plans with the various weather conditions you set up. If you're looking for an unpredictable hyper offense Lando set, this would be it. It's obviously very difficult to set up, but if you can, it would make for one of the most interesting games ever. Landorus has a pretty good special attack stat in 105, which is higher than even Starmie. Combined with Life Orb, he makes for some insane damage, especially when you factor in Terra. This can be great against opposing Landorus since, well, they're weak to water and ice, obviously, and there are some downsides to it, like it would not be able to benefit from normal moves like U-turn or Earthquake, which are really great. And that is unfortunate. And you also won't be able to Scarf your Landorus or use leftovers if you choose to stick with this exact set. Life Orb means you won't get that longevity, but it doesn't really matter since this version of Landorus isn't really here for a long time. It's here to cause damage. And plus, Lando's already a pretty bulky Pokemon with a pretty great typing. It does have that natural bulk and typing to help him anyways. That being said, I'll give it credit where credit is due. If I was playing Gen 9 OU and I was faced with this Lando, I wouldn't know what to do. If we were going to see a crazy Lando set be a weather set, I would have thought it would have been Generation 5, where it was constant weather wars, where it looked like Poseidon and Zeus were fighting 24/7. Or I guess Poseidon and Gaia before the mythology nerds come at me. I was throwing a lot of shade at the set, but that's just because I have a heart full of hatred. In reality, I actually kind of like the set, and all of these sets, because what's the point of competitive Pokemon if we always use the same viable sets and don't experiment? It is a game at the end of the day, and we're supposed to have fun. So I think everyone should use weird sets that don't really work, and let me use the normal sets so that I beat everyone by default. I feel like I often forget that we're supposed to have fun in these games. So feel free to comment any ideas or any sets that I missed, or any other reasonings for these sets that I might have missed. Thank you!